This year, a friend invited me to visit, relax in the village in the summer with her family. I decided to spend my last 2 weeks of vacation there and came to stay at the end of hot July. Her little cousin also lived in the village. He was 6 years old. The boy was very unusual, often playing alone with his toys or just sleeping. By the way, he loved to sleep very much, even during the day. At any time, he could fall asleep and sleep for 2 hours. The neighborhood boys did not want to accept him into their company in any way, and he did not seek to. Soon my friend and I realized why. One hot summer day he was drawing something with felt-tip pens. My friend and I walked past him to get a towel and go swimming on the river. He stared at me intently and silently, then came up and ran his felt-tip pen over my knee, drawing a red line, and then said, "There will be blood." He laughed strangely and ran away. At first I didn't attach any importance to this, quietly lived on my arm, and we went to the river to swim. The banks of that river and the bottom were completely littered with small stones, thanks to which it received the name Kamenka. So, when I came to the water, I tripped and fell right on a sharp stone, cut my knee. After bathing, I looked at the wound, and I was shocked. The wound was located exactly in the place that the boy did not mark with a felt-tip pen. Even on the edge of the wound there was still a trace of the marker line. The next morning, a boy woke us up and grabbed my friend by the left hand, said, "It will hurt here." After yesterday's incident, we guessed what could happen. And so it happened. A friend fell off her bike and hurt herself badly. The bruise was, of course, on her right arm. We were greatly affected by these two events. We asked the child how he knew about our injuries. He said that a woman with a black scarf on her head came to him in a dream and talked to him. A week later, when the mysterious predictions of the boy had already begun to be forgotten, a familiar guy who works at the stable came to us at Kostia and offered us a ride on horses. The boy, seeing him, ran up and started pointing at him. "You'll be living in a cemetery soon." My friend and I got scared. I apologized, and the three of us went to the stable. But the next day, this guy, riding a motorcycle, lost control and crashed into a brick fence. He died, and our shock simply knew no bounds. We really began to be afraid of this boy, began to avoid him. And then the day of my departure came. When I got on the bus, a friend called me and said in a tearful voice that her brother had drowned. What pulled him into the water? He's never been swimming, we'll never know. Many years ago, a young girl lived with her parents in a remote village in Japan. She was very attractive, with long black hair, pale white skin and stunning luxurious eyes. Young Japanese men came from all over the neighborhood just to ask her out. However, the problem was that none of the young men could stand more than one date with her, and even before the end of the evening they were always seen running away and screaming in terror. None of them talked about what had happened to them, and no one else wanted to approach this girl a second time. Soon, young people stopped coming to ask her out, and her parents began to despair and were afraid that their daughter would never get married. People began to say that something was wrong with a beautiful girl, and, apparently, there was some kind of unnoticeable defect that scared off all the grooms. Her parents were puzzled, they could not understand why so many young people fled in terror from their daughter. One day her father saw a young man walking along the path of the garden. "What do you need?" the old man asked. "I would like to ask your daughter out on a date," the young man said. My father was delighted. The young man was surprised by her beauty and invited her on a date. She agreed and walked him to the door when he left. "Not now," she whispered. "Come back at midnight and be careful not to make too much noise so as not to wake up my parents." The young man returned that night and knocked softly on her window. Suddenly the window opened and the girl crawled outside. "Before I agree to date you, you have to promise me something," she whispered. The young man agreed. "I want you to pass the test of love. If you really love me, you will pass this test. Promise me that if you don't pass, you won't tell anyone about it." Follow me, the girl said. Where are we going? The young man asked. Dark night, moon. In Japan, they say that it is on such a night that ghosts roam the earth. The young couple heard ominous sounds and howling dogs. They walked quietly through the deserted streets. The girl hurried along the dark, overgrown path, and the young man had to run after her. Eventually they reached the old cemetery, and the young man was able to see the old tombstones covered with moss and overgrown grass. The girl's nightgown fluttered in the wind. She was standing on the edge of a grave that looked pretty fresh. The young man saw how the girl took an old rusty shovel in her hand and began to dig, scattering the earth around her. Then she fell to her knees and began to tear the ground with her hands until she came across the coffin. Imagine his surprise when she lifted the lid and tore off the hand of the corpse lying inside. Then she put her hand to her mouth and tore off a small piece with her teeth. She was slurping loudly, staring at him. This is a test of love. If you love me, you will do what I do. You will eat what I eat. With these words, she pulled out her other hand and threw it to the young man. He didn't hesitate, took a big bite. Now he was very surprised. He had never thought that human flesh could be so delicious. Suddenly, he realized that it was just a joke. The beautiful girl laughed. You know, you're the only one who didn't run away from me. I want to marry you. You're very brave. The young man did not smile back at her. He just stood in the dark on the edge of the grave, looking at her. His eyes were filled with rage and anger. Is that all? He growled. I thought you were just like me. This time the girl was running screaming. Mud, slush, rain. A terrible day consumed the whole city. The girl was waiting for the minibus she needed, and now the moment has come. She, as always, came in, paid the fare, sat down on a soft, cold chair. After one stop, a man sat down next to the girl. An ordinary, no different man, but in his eyes, as the girl noticed, there was something strange. In some ways, he looked like a robot, but without paying attention to it, she turned up the music louder and sat down on the phone. A few seconds later, a message came from some unknown address. Did you find out? The girl is typing a message. No, and who is it? The interlocutor is typing a message. Turn your head to the left and find out, the lover will sit on the phone. Fear crept through the girl, but she still turned her head in the right direction. But then she went into complete shock. The man on that person's avatar and her neighbor were the same. Surprised? I think so. The girl is typing messages. Who are you? What do you want from me? The interlocutor is typing messages. I'm someone who doesn't want anyone to be addicted to the World Wide Web. Now turn your head to the right. Slowly and fearfully, the girl turned her head. Immediately, she felt a cold touch on her hand. Pain, as if the body is being cut off alive. A terrible scream burst the minibus like a lightning strike. Everyone abruptly turned their heads to the last seat and saw a terrible picture. A look of horror was etched on the girl's face. Discharge and conclusion of death. This person had a cardiac arrest from a strong psychological shock.